welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. That is Xan. I am Shoob, and today we are here for ACC win totals part 2. We are going to be covering the former Coastal Division teams. RIP Coastal Chaos. Gone but not forgotten. We will be talking about Duke, Georgia Tech, Miami, North Carolina, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. Some old school Coastal Chaos on deck, Xan. How's your day been today, man? You ready to get into these win totals?
Hey, it's a busy day, man. Working all day, running some errands, but hey, I'm here and I'm ready to dive into it. Let's get to it, man.
Ditto on that. All right, let's jump into it. Waste no time. So we're going to start off here. We are going to be signing confidence points this year. 1 point for low confidence, 2 for medium confidence, and 3 points for high confidence if you are new. So that way, when we do our over-under win total predictions, you will know the confidence level that we have in each of those picks. So let's get going, man. Starting up at the top, the Duke Blue Devils, sitting with a line of 5.5 wins. There's been some movement on this line, man, and that goes for the next two teams we're going to cover as well. But Duke, their line was sitting up at 6 wins, and the under just got hammered, and now it has been hammered down to 5.5. And there's more money coming in on the under at this number. The juice is down to minus 160 and then plus 130 on the over now. So the betting market is not too high on Duke, to say the least. But now with an official line of 5.5, that is our reference point. Xan, what's your take on the Blue Devils under first-year head coach Manny Diaz? Welcome back to the head coaching ranks. What do we got?
Well, I gotta say, when it comes to Duke, I did my initial research a couple days ago. So the line was still at 6 at that time. So will that change my opinion? We'll dive into it. So let's look at Manny Diaz. Let's look at the staff that he's brought together. Offensive coordinator Jonathan Brewer, who was the co-offensive coordinator at SMU, who spouted the 35th most efficient offense last year, which people may not know because not everyone watches SMU or the American Athletic Conference, which, by the way, SMU ponying up over the ACC, surrendering 9 years of television rights. Talk about that oil money, man. But anyway, back to the task at hand. And defensive coordinator Jonathan Patke. This particular hire is like, what? Because Duke was 27th in defensive efficiency last year. Okay, follow me, Shoob. Jonathan Patke was the Texas State defensive coordinator who boasted the 106th most efficient defense last year. I know they're working with less over there, but they still don't play. I mean, they still play in a different conference. They don't play against like these Power 5 teams. And this is an aggregate based on, the strength of your schedule. That's how these statistics, come up with these numbers. And so that's a little bit of a head scratcher for me. I feel like they could have gotten someone else. Duke has had some recent success. They're in the Power 5. I feel like they definitely could have maybe swung for the fences a little bit better than that. But anyway, let's jump into personnel, man. Coaching important, but personnel even more important. The Jimmies and Joes win the games. Riley Leonard is gone. He's off to Notre Dame, off to greener pastures, quite literally. And then we have Malik Murphy coming in from Texas. Now, this is an interesting pickup. Now, Malik Murphy, he was highly touted coming out of high school. You and I both know this, Shoob. We've talked about it. But it's really hard to kind of gauge what Malik Murphy is. Very limited sample size and what we've seen from him. But he does have some sample size. But he hasn't been all that impressive in what we've seen so far, Shoob, or at least not for me. How do you feel about Malik Murphy?
No, I'm in agreement there. He only played in 2 games last year for Texas. I watched both of those games, and he did not perform to expectations. I mean, remember, they almost lost to Houston. That was not a good Houston team. So his stock has come down, I think.
For sure. And we have to keep in mind that this is also when he has like all these first, second, third round talents on offensive line blocking for him. He's got these 2 receivers who got drafted to the NFL in this last draft, Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell. I mean, come on now. It's Jonathan Brooks, not to mention, I don't know if he was playing in that game actually, so we'll toss him that. I know Brooks got hurt. But still, man, that Texas roster was stacked and he still struggled. Now he's going to a team that has even less talent on the roster with a defensive-minded head coach. I don't know, man. We'll see. Jordan Waters is now gone. He entered the transfer portal. Their stud running back from last year. He's no longer on the team. They're bringing in Star Thomas from New Mexico State, who was an under the radar team last year, pretty solid, and he spouts about 650 yards of production to bring in, and then they return Jaquez Moore for another 600 yards. So there's at least returning production at the running back position. So they're not at a complete loss in that particular spot, but they did lose their main bell cow. They also return Jordan Moore, who was their top receiver last year, 62 receptions, 800 yards, 8 touchdowns. Not bad at all. But the other guys that come back don't really boast that much, production or for a quarterback who has kind of struggled in the past. We'll see how that bodes, Shoob. And another thing that makes me nervous is, we referenced the great Texas O line and how Malik Murphy still struggled with that great Texas O line. I feel like Malik Murphy is going to be a run heavy QB because they lost Graham Barton to the NFL, their stud tackle. They lost their center, Jacob Monk, who also got drafted into the NFL. They only have one returning starter for my number, Shoob, if you want to double check me on that one. But two lost to the NFL. That basically tells you you're losing significant production. And this is Duke. This isn't a team that reloads with 4 or 5 stars like Alabama, Georgia. This is Duke. You don't have another NFL guy in the midst behind those dudes. So definitely the offensive line is going to take a step back as well. So overall, Shoob, it's looking like this entire offense is going to take a step back. The running game should still be at least sufficient. But overall, man, Jonathan Brewer's got a big task ahead of him in coordinating this offense. Now, when we turn to the flip side, look at the defensive line. I mean, they have a lot of contributors on the defensive line. There's no apex predator on that side, but they lost RJ Oben to Notre Dame, which is kind of a big loss. That's one of their best pass rushers, man. And then they also lost Ainias Peebles to Virginia Tech, like two very, very key cogs of that defensive line. And then they lost Dwayne Carter as well. So, I mean, it's tough sledding, man. Like the arrow points down on Duke all the way on so many levels, especially on the D line. So lines of scrimmage, man, they're already weaker on both sides. We know how important lines of scrimmage are in college football and football in general. And now let's look at the next level. We have Nick Morris who returns. He's a pretty solid player, but what else do you have there? Not much when you look at the roster and the production. And then you go back into the secondary, and we do have some good news. Chandler Rivers is returning. He's a solid player. And then Josh Pickett is also returning, who's got some experience on the other end. But, the unit is mostly intact, at least in the secondary. They didn't take too many blows there. So there's at least something there that can spell maybe a strength for this defense. But ultimately, man, like it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be a very good unit on either side of the ball. Let's dive into the schedule, man, and just see, because sometimes the schedule can be your best friend, even if you have some failed, some shortcomings in some areas. We look at Elon. That's definitely going to be a win. You can't be Elon. What are you doing? Then you're going to go at Northwestern. That's a probable. We know Northwestern. You never know what you're going to get with Northwestern. That is just the bread and butter of Northwestern football. They can lose to anybody. They can beat anybody. That's a probable. I got them beating UConn, beating Middle Tennessee State. Then they got to go play UNC, and probably going to lose to Unk. And then at Georgia Tech, probable, but I kind of like that one's a toss up for me, but I kind of lean towards the L there. And then you got the bye week to prep for FSU. Hey, I'll say this. It's not going to matter. You're still going to lose to FSU. And then you're going to go play SMU, which I think is a probable. And you're at home, but I think SMU is just a much better team. I think SMU will win that. At Miami, who looks pretty dang good this year, probably a loss. At NC State, who we talked about looks pretty dang good this year, probably a loss. Then you get a bye week to prepare for Virginia Tech, who also looks pretty good this year, but you're at least at home in this matchup. Maybe you can make this one a little bit closer if, Malik Murphy's getting it together by late season, but probably still a loss, Shoob. And then you go at Wake Forest, which I think they can win. But I was looking at 6, but even at 6, Shoob, or even at 5.5 where it's at now, I think this team would be lucky to go bowling this year. And that's why I'm going to go under with about 2 confidence points.
Interesting. So we're going to have an under with 2 confidence points here from Xan. So when I look at this Duke team and I look at the coaching staff, Manny Diaz now, he's back being a head coach. And for some reason, I think we didn't grade this higher when we did our coaching grade series, which I don't know how that one slipped past us, but we didn't do this one. But honestly, I was thinking back at it and I was like, well, it's kind of one of those things where you get a coach like Manny Diaz, who obviously He was at Miami for 3 years. He went 21-15 as the head coach there for 3 seasons. And, his replacement, Mario Cristobal, was supposed to really, up the ante there. And honestly, Cristobal's had a worse record than Manny Diaz at Miami so far. So, Manny's looking back in hindsight saying, haha, I wasn't so bad, was I? And you kicked me out the door. But anyhow, Manny Diaz, I think the narrative about him is that he's a good coordinator because he was a great defensive coordinator for Penn State 2 years he was there up in Happy Valley. I think that's the narrative. He's a good coordinator, but isn't really cut out to be a head coach. Well, kind of similar to Bill O'Brien. I look at a place like Duke and I'm like, I think Duke is a place where I think Manny Diaz, you're kind of out of the limelight. I think like he could run a decent program there at Duke. And I say decent, nothing spectacular. But I think Manny Diaz can sort of settle in and find his footing at a place like Duke. And I look at the offensive coordinator, like you mentioned, Jonathan Brewer. He was the offensive quality control. Try to say that 3 times. He was the OQC coach for Miami under Manny Diaz. And then you look at the defensive coordinator, Jonathan Platke. Yeah, Texas State defense was not very good last year, but you know what? Platke worked under Diaz at multiple schools. So Mr. Diaz went with 2 guys that has worked with him in the past, underneath him in the past, I should say. So that's where all this comes from. So Manny Diaz went, he got his guys that he's worked with in the past that he knows are familiar with the system. But I don't know, man. I had a hard time in this team, man, because you said it. This team, the drop off is just going to be big. Like Elko was a phenomenal coach. Like you lost one of the best coaches in the country. You had him for 2 years. It was a phenomenal hire. You had Duke shooting way above its weight class, and yeah, there's going to be a huge drop off here. But I don't know. I look at the offense and I look at the QB room, and I'm like, I kind of like the QB depth here for Duke standards. Now, keep in mind, for Duke standards, I actually like the QB options. And I know we were talking about Malik Murphy a lot, but here's my hot take. See, I don't have a hot take on the over-under win total. Well, maybe it is. My hot take is that Malik Murphy won't even end up being the starter for majority of the year. I think Grayson Loftus is going to be the starter for the majority of the year. That's my hot take here with Duke. So I know we're here for over under win total predictions, but my spicy take is that Grayson Loftus is going to be the guy. And Loftus pretty much had decent passing numbers when he took over for Riley Leonard last year. He's a true sophomore, so he's young. He's got upside. And then you also have Henry Balin, who played a little bit last year as well. He's a redshirt sophomore.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. The
yeah,
the Prince of Yorkshire.
the Prince of Yorkshire. Yeah. When Riley Leonard got hurt, you had Loftus and Balin come in and hold the fort down, really. I mean, remember, we were kind of worried about this win total last year because Riley Leonard got hurt. Riley Leonard didn't even play half the season. They still hit the over on the win total. Like, that's one, it just shows how much of a good play that was last year, and we were all on it. But like, two, it shows how good of a coach Elko is. But three, like, I don't think the drop off at quarterback was that bad. That was something we were worried about, but it wasn't that bad. So I actually have confidence here in a little bit of a floor with the QB room. And now I'll just get to the point. Let's take a look at the schedule here. My model is Duke is 6.4 wins. I know that's a bit high, and I do not agree with the model here. I think the model is a bit too high on Duke. I'm not sure what's driving that number right there, but the model is definitely too high on Duke. But I look at the schedule though, and I do have them favored over, of course, Elon, UConn, Middle Tennessee State. I think that's pretty reasonable. You got those 3 wins in the bank if you take care of business. They do go at Middle Tennessee State, which does worry me a little bit. And then I have toss-ups, home versus North Carolina, at Northwestern, at Wake, and at Georgia Tech. 5 to 6 wins seems about right to me, to be honest. Honestly, my gut's kind of telling me 5-7 is going to be the final record, but you know what? Screw it, man. I was going through these win
That's what I'm
totals.
thinking too.
But you know what? That's what my gut's telling me. I'm disagreeing with my gut. I'm going with the model. I'm gonna say over 5.5. And I don't like this at all. I put in my notes like extremely low confidence. Like
Wait,
this
no,
is like the most lowest.
your model says over. Your model says 6.4. So you're not
It
going
does
against
say
your
over,
model.
but my gut says 5-7. The model says 6.4. My gut says 5. So I'm going with the model. Screw my
Oh, I
gut.
got you. But you're overriding your
Screw
gut and your model. Oh no, you're overriding your
No, I'm
gut for the
overriding my
model.
gut. I'm overriding my gut, and I'm blindly
Yeah.
following the model here. Listen, I have extremely low confidence in this one. Like I fully expect to be wrong about this. So I'm going over. Long story short, we can move on now. Enough about Duke. All right.
I will say this, Shoob. If Duke wins their first 4 games, like they pull a hat against Northwestern, then they got a good shot at this. But you look at the back end of their schedule, there's not a lot of wins to be had there, except for maybe Wake Forest.
No,
So
definitely
they
not.
kind of got to get at least start. They got to start 3-1 or 4-0, or this is cooked.
I completely agreed. Completely agreed. I think we'll know by October if this is going to hit or not. All right, moving on. Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's very interesting team, man. You got head coach Brent Key coming in as his third season at Georgia Tech. First season as an interim. Now it's his third season effectively as the head coach. And their win total has been bet down a little bit. I don't know if you noticed that. It was up at 5.5 wins earlier. It has come down now to 5 and just a hair, a shade to the under at -120, -110 on the other side. So professional bettors have been coming in and betting the under on this team, which is definitely not a good sign. But I don't know, man. I went through this team and I think this is a very polarizing team. I think that's the best way to describe it. What's your assessment on the Yellow Jackets for 2024?
Well, the Yellow Jackets are interesting because they have a new defensive coordinator in Tyler Santucci from Duke. And I mean, he was under Elko. We know what they were able to accomplish. They're 27th in defensive efficiency. It's pretty good right there. I mean, their bugaboo last year was defense, man. They were 76th in defensive efficiency last year, but 33rd in offensive efficiency. So it shows where the weakness lied with this team. Now, Georgia Tech, just like their mascot, the Yellow Jackets, they could be that thorn in your side. They could sting you when you least expect it. But they can also, you know, lose their stinger and die at any moment against any team. That's why this team is so hard to figure out, man. And so when I look at this, and we collectively agree that the ACC is probably going to be the best that it's been in maybe 10 years collectively as a conference, it's really hard to determine how this is going to shake out. Haynes King is returning. I mean, he didn't even have a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, although he did significantly improve from his time at A&M at 2,800 yards and 60% completion. He's a little bit of a dual threat. But Georgia Tech, man, your backup is Zach Pyron. Don't know how I feel about that. You go off and look at the running backs. You do bring back Jamal Haynes, who is a 1,000-yard rusher, so that's always a plus. He had averaged over 6 yards a carry, 7 tutties. Good player right there. You return Malik Rutherford, who's returning 500 yards of production. You're returning Eric Singleton, another 700 yards of production. And you got to keep in mind, like, that's Haynes King only threw for 2,800 here. So we're returning a significant amount of production here. Just the top 2 contributors, basically. And then offensive line, 4 out of 5 starters coming back. So I'm expecting the offensive line to improve at least a little bit. So I think it could be at least an average offensive line. And I'm expecting improvement on offense in general, just from the returning production that we have with Georgia Tech and more continuity in the system with these guys playing together. I think it bodes well for them. When you look on the defensive side of the ball, they do have some key returners, but they lost one of their solid starters. But overall, this unit is probably going to be about par for the course for what it was last year. I don't think it'll be too significantly different. And then losing Paul Mayola at the linebacker position is going to hurt a little bit, but they do have Efford, who's going to slate in, and he grades out pretty well. So they do have other experienced guys that are in the rotation. So it'll be interesting to see what this front 7 can do. And then off to D-line, they do return a lot of D-linemen, Shoob. But they did lose Kennard to the transfer portal to South Carolina, which is kind of a big loss. But ultimately, they do have a lot of rotational pieces that do boast some good amount of playing time. So because of that particular loss, and knowing that they've got some stuff in the rotation on the D-line, it could be an okay unit. We'll see. There's at least some returners there, but no real standouts. So Georgia Tech is one of those teams that has the potential to be good, but not great. Improvement on offense, defense still something to be desired. Let's go to the schedule. They open up against Florida State, man. And we mentioned this when we were talking about Florida State. For some reason, and I'm telling you, the thorn in the side, the stinger of the hornet, I feel like there's a chance they could beat FSU week 1 and still have a terrible season. Like legitimately, I do feel like they're just one of those teams that could just jump out of nowhere and absolutely hit you with the hornet's nest. I have that as a probable. Although I am going to be more realistic here and chalk it up as a loss for the sake of predicting my win total. Next, you have Georgia State, probably a win. And then you go at Syracuse, which I have as a probable because Syracuse is looking like a pretty decent team this year with what they've brought in. They might be able to turn some heads and surprise. New head coach over there as well. And then you got VMI, going to be a W at Louisville, probable, most likely a loss. Jeff Brom at home, midseason. Come on now, I don't think you're winning that. Then you're going bye week to play Duke off a bye week. I have as a probable, but you're coming off a bye to prepare for Duke, and we just went over Duke. We're not as high on the Blue Devils this year. I think you win that game. I think that's winnable for them coming off the bye week. Then you go play Young's House. You're probably going to lose to UNC, but you never know with UNC. They're one of those teams that, always seems to punch below their weight class in recent years. So we'll see when we go over UNC how that works out. But I'm going to say probable, but most likely a loss to UNC. Then you go play Notre Dame, you lose. You play Miami, I think you lose. You go on a bye week, you lose to NC State still, and then you go lose to Georgia. So their back half of their schedule, Shoob, is rough,
It's
my
brutal.
friend. UNC, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State, Georgia, all teams that we think are going to be at the top of the ACC, basically, and all teams. Well, and then Georgia. It's
Yeah,
rough, man. It's rough.
it's brutal.
So they're going to have to bag these wins early. And honestly, I don't think they can do it. Even though it's at a line of 5.5, I'm going under, but I'm going to go with a confidence point of just one because they are a team that can sting. And if they do sting for FSU in week one, there's a chance that they go bowling. So I'm going to go under confidence point of one.
So the line's actually coming down to 5. I forgot if I mentioned that earlier. It's now at
Oh,
5
you
because
did.
it's
You
been
did.
bet under.
Well, I'll say this. I'll still go under because I think it's more likely that they go. I think they're going to win 5 games. I'll just say that. But I think it's more likely that they lose an extra one and win four than they go bowling. We'll say that.
Makes sense. Yeah, so man, Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech.
I like
Yeah,
them too, man. I like.
yep.
I want to see them get good again, but it's just. I just their schedule, man. It's rough.
Yeah, so let me tell you the story of how I did my analysis and came to my decision here on the Yellow Jackets. So I go into this with a bias going into it, thinking like, oh, Georgia Tech, I think they could be like a sneaky team. I like think their offense is gonna be pretty solid. Like, see what's the defense looking like. They could probably pull off an upset or two, get back to going bowling and stuff. And that's what I'm thinking going into it. I started looking at the offense and I'm like, all right, you got 8 out of 11 starters returning. Like Haynes King took a step forward. Like you got your top receivers returning, running backs look great, offensive line looks to take a step forward this year. A lot of experience return. I'm like, all right, we're cooking here, man. Like we're cooking with some gas with this offense. Like I actually like this offense a good bit for Georgia Tech. And then we go to the defense. And I'm like, all right, they're pretty bad last year. Not a lot of guys returning, but you got a new DC coming in. I start looking in depth, and I'm like, not really liking what they got coming back. I'm like, this defense ain't looking too good at all. Like this defense is not looking good, very good. It's not looking very good at all. And I'm starting to be like, all right, well, they still got a pretty good offense, but the defense probably going to hold them back. All right, pump the brakes a little bit, and then I go look at the schedule. I'm like, this, this schedule is a nightmare. Like this is easily the strongest or the toughest non Big Ten or SEC schedule, like for any team, like easily. Like this is a gauntlet. And I look at my model. My model is saying 5 wins on the dot, actually. So the model is 5 wins even. And I don't know, man. I just look at the schedule. Like at some of that's like you said, man, sometimes the schedule is what tells the story of these teams. And I think Georgia Tech, this is going to be an example, a perfect example of a team that I think will actually be like a little bit better than it was last year. Like I think the team will actually
I
be
agree.
better, but they will have a worse record because this schedule
Mhm.
is a
But
nightmare.
they'll be a better team, and people don't understand that.
Nope.
Yeah, people don't understand that. Like just because we say over or under, it doesn't mean we think a team is better or worse. The schedule is such a big component of what you look like at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And the bottom line is the schedule is brutal and this defense is just not going to be very good. And I think that's what's ultimately going to hold Georgia Tech back this season. Now, the model has them at 5 wins even. And I look at the non-conference, you got Georgia State should be a win. VMI, that's a dub. and then you got Notre Dame, definitely not a win, and then Georgia. I mean, that forget it. So the non-con is not doing them any favors. They got a really tough ACC draw with their ACC opponents. They got like almost all of the tough ACC opponents, and they didn't even get like any of the bad ones. Like they didn't draw Wake Forest, they didn't draw Virginia, like they didn't draw Cal, they didn't draw Stanford. They drew like every top ACC team and then like a couple of the middle tier ones that aren't bad but are still decent. So I mean, this was just a brutal draw, man. So the way I look at the schedule, the line's sitting there at 5 wins, and I'm like, okay, assuming you lose to Florida State, Louisville, Notre Dame, Vautech, Miami, NC State, Georgia, like those are teams that I think are clear cut better than Georgia Tech. I only see 5 wins left. There's 5 games left that I think they can win. And to be generous, you got to assume that they go on the road or that they go away and beat Syracuse. You got to assume that they handle business at home against Duke. You got to assume that they beat North Carolina. Those are big assumptions to make. It's not even a great assumption to say they can win those games. And then on top of that, let's say they do beat one of those teams that I think are clear cut better. Like let's say they do pull off one of those upsets, you still have to assume that they take care of business against those other teams that I just mentioned, the Syracuse's, Dukes, UNC's. I mean, it's a lot of assuming to do. And at 5.5, I would have went to this under with a lot more confidence, but because the line has been beat down to 5, and I think for good reason, it's just a brutal schedule, and I'm gonna have to go under, but I'm gonna go at this with medium confidence because I was originally going to go at this with high confidence if it was 5.5, because I was just like, there's no way they're going to get to 6. Like if they get to 6 wins, if they go bowling with this schedule, it means that Georgia Tech had to beat one of those like top teams in the ACC. It means that they did that, and they also took care of business against all these toss-ups that we're talking about. So if they get to 6 wins, then like I think Brent Key is probably your guy. Like Brent Key is
True.
probably your guy because that would be a great coaching job.
True.
And also, I mean, I hate to say this, but like let's again, they won 7 games last year, but they won their seventh game against UCF in the bowl game. But the only reason they got to a bowl game is because Mario Cristobal didn't take a knee
Miami.
because of stupidity. Yeah. Otherwise,
Yeah.
Georgia Tech wouldn't even went to a bowl game. So like, I mean, you're just Mario Cristobal just taking a knee away from finishing 5-7. Instead you go 7-6 last year. So like that record is very misleading. I mean, that's just the truth, guys. Sorry. So unfortunately, I'm gonna go under with 2 confidence points here, and yeah, but it's just a brutal schedule. And like I said, the team will be better, but the record will not. And that's college football in a nutshell right there. The team will be better, but the record will not. It's just a tough schedule, but this offense will be good to watch though. Like I will enjoy watching the Georgia Tech offense. I think it'll be that unit, that side of the ball will be fun to watch for the Yellow Jacket fans. All right, moving on. The aforementioned Miami Hurricanes, the ones that got Georgia Tech the bowl eligibility last year and got Georgia Tech to a bowl win. Mario Cristobal returns for his third season at Miami. And boy, there is pressure. There is pressure on Mario to win this year at Miami. I mean, they have a lot of money. They have been spending it. They have been going ham in the portal, and they are bringing talent in. The question is, can they finally cash it in? So it's gonna be a program to watch, and there's gonna be a lot of eyes on Miami this year to win in Cristobal's third season. The win total has dropped down to 9 wins. It was originally at 9.5. It got dropped down to 9, which just seems like it's killing us right now. All these teams that we've covered so far, these win totals are getting hammered under. So Miami's win total now has dropped to 9 wins even, and there's a little bit of juice on the under at -130. So like there's a lot of money coming in on this under all of a sudden for Miami. But make of that as you wish. Xan, take us away here on the Canes.
All right, Shoob. I'll say this. This Miami team actually looks pretty solid. And them getting Cam Ward is kind of big because they have a bona fide playmaking quarterback. And that in itself is what makes them so intriguing this year. He replaces Van Dyke. Van Dyke's no scrub, but he's not Cam Ward. And then you also bring in Damian Martinez from Oregon State. Like, dude, that's a 1,000-yard rusher right there. That they just stack themselves on offense. You return a lot of key cogs. Xavier Restrepo, 1,000-yard receiver coming back. Jacoby George returns, 800-yard receiver. Then you add Sam Brown, the portal from Houston, and another 800-yard receiver. You've got production on production on production. You return most of your offensive line, although there are some pieces they're going to supplement. Overall, man, this offense looks pretty nice. It looks pretty dang nice. And considering like what they were last year, I'm expecting them to take a step up in their play this year. So I think they're going to be a very tough team to stop. The only thing that's going to stop this team is if Cam Ward gets hurt. They were 36th in offensive efficiency last year, Shoob. Now add Damian Martinez, add another 800 receiver, and add Cam Ward to the mix, an improvement at quarterback. I think they can go into the top 25 in offense, if not maybe even the top 20, which is quite a leap, and that's very significant. Now we look at the defense now, because this is a two-sided game, unfortunately. They lost 3 defensive backs to the NFL. That's a little bit concerning for me. It is hard to supplement talent like that. They added Marshall Powell from Washington, who grades as a 4-star transfer. Maybe he can help with that, or Michelle Powell, sorry. But ultimately, the returners they have some experience, like playing in rotation, but none of them are their big head honchos. I mean, 3 dudes legitimately lost to the NFL. You're going to take a step back in your secondary more than likely. Then we look at the next level, the linebackers. They both return, which is really nice. So you're going to at least stay where you were at that level. And then, of course, Francisco Mauigoa is going to be back as well, who's a young player. So he's only going to get better. So I like what you got there. At the defensive line level, I actually kind of like their D-line. They brought in Tyler Barron from Louisville, a couple other transfer guys. They got Elijah Alston from Marshall, which is a very quiet, great transfer. He doesn't grade very high in the transfer portal, but he's highly impactful per his PFF grade, Shoob. I mean, it just shows that he's a dominant D-line force. And so it's not one of those guys that we're going to see, but he's one of the highest rated D-linemen in all of PFF. And so I think we're going to see some pretty good defensive line play from the Miami Hurricane. And then we got to keep in mind here that they still have Messidor, who is just a rotation guy now. So that speaks to the quality of their D-line. Messidor would start on most D-lines. So I'm saying this Miami team might be weak in the secondary, but everywhere else, they're looking pretty dang good. So the teams that I think they could be vulnerable to are teams who have a significant passing advantage, which luckily in the ACC, there aren't too many teams who are significant, air raid teams. Let's look at their schedule, Shoob. They start at Florida. That's going to be a tough game. Florida hasn't given up yet. They still have hope before playing their brutal schedule. Florida wants to get this good win, get it off to a good season. And it's in the swamp, man. Game day. People are going to show out. UF faithful are going to show out. This is a toss-up. This is going to be a very tough game for Miami to win. This will be a true litmus test for what the rest of their season is going to look like. This is very important, but I can't definitively give them this win towards their total. I will give it as a toss-up. Then you get Florida A&M and Ball State, 2 freebies. You go at USF. USF's getting a little bit better, but they're going to beat USF. Then you got Virginia Tech, which is a probable, but you're at home. I think this game is winnable for you. As much as I like Virginia Tech, considering everything Miami's got, I think this is a very winnable game. As long as Cristobal does not Cristobal himself, it will be good. Then we've got at Cal, which I think they should win. You got the bye week before you go at Louisville. That's huge because Jeff Brom don't play. This game I have is a probable, but we know big game Brom. That's why it's a probable. But I think this bye week is going to be very, very beneficial to them. I think they will win that game off the bye week just purely because of the bye week. Then you go to play FSU. I think that's a probable because, look, I think FSU is still a very solid team. I think they're very well coached. We talked about it in the win total, Shoob. I do think there are some chinks in the armor for FSU, especially when you play a team with as much talent as Miami has offensively and as much talent as they have on their defensive line. I think beating FSU, as long as they don't, buy on their own foot or do whatever, shoot themselves in the foot, they'll be fine. Then Duke's a win at Georgia Tech. A probable just because of last year, but I think they're going to get revenge. They're going to win that game. Then a bye week to prepare for Wake Forest. That's going to be a slaughter. And then you go at Syracuse. Syracuse is better than I think a lot of people think, but I think they will beat Syracuse. So when I look at this, Shoob, I've got probables against Florida. I've got probable Virginia Tech, probable FSU, probable Louisville. I mean, it's sitting there at 9, Shoob. And even if they maybe get upset by Georgia Tech or Cuse, I mean, if you just give me two of those probables, I'm looking at an over here. And if not, I'm looking at a push. So, I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this, Shoe, but at 9, I think 9 wins is good. I think 9 to 10. I think 10 is more likely than 8. I'm going over, Shoe. I'm going to assume that Mario Cristobal, with this roster, can finally put together the team that Miami has been searching for such a long time.
Gotcha. How many confidence points?
I'm going to go with 1 point
Huh.
because it is still Cristobal.
Yep. I think that's a wise move there. So, Miami. Yeah, Miami, Miami, Miami. Yeah, man, I think you really hit the nail on the head with everything, especially on the offensive side of the ball, dude. I on paper, this offense is going to be fun to watch. Very fun to watch. If I'm a Miami fan, I love the new toys that you got to play with. Cam Ward, now that you're in this offense with this talent around him, there's large upside. And I know that you said you predicted the offense jumping into the top 15, maybe top 20. I completely agree. That's exactly what I wrote down. I
Top
think
25 to top 20, yeah,
yeah, well, I
for
wrote
sure.
down
Yeah.
top 15. Like, I think this offense is top 15, and I think if it really goes well and this thing really hits, like, it could be like a top 10 offense this year. Offensive line, too. I think the offensive line's going to be good as well. You got guys like Jalen Rivers, Francis Malgoa, they return at tackle, both sides of the tackle box with large upside. And then the running back room, you already hit on. The running back room is pretty stacked, man. I got I got Xavier Restrepo, who graded out as the second best receiver in the ACC last year. As of right now, he's a projected second round pick in the draft. You got Cam Ward, who's a projected late third, maybe early fourth round pick, sort of like quarterback. And then you got Damian Martinez, who I was a little, I mean, he's a great player. I was surprised to see Damian Martinez is projected to go in the early fourth round potentially as of now. So like Miami's got some toys,
A lot
and
of NFL
normally
talent. Yep.
normally when these teams have NFL talent on it, that usually is a good sign. Usually is a good sign when you're projecting these teams. And then the defense, I think, is going to be very solid. You got five new transfer starters. There's definitely questions with the new defensive line, the secondary drop off. So I think regression from last year on the defensive side of the ball is definitely in question, but I don't think it can drop off too badly. And whatever drop off, whatever regression there is defensively, I think it's going to get offset and probably offset even more by the jump that the offense is going to take. So I really think it's an overall net positive for Miami. So let's get down to business, man. The model has 8.7 wins for Miami, 8.7. So the model's telling me this is a very, very slight under here. And, I had such a hard time with this, man, because I look at the schedule. I got Miami favored in 7 games. I have them in toss-ups against Florida, against Virginia Tech, at Louisville, and then versus Florida State. Now, here's the thing. The model only has them projected for 8.7 wins. I have them favored in 7 games. I got those toss-ups. They're not a significant underdog anywhere on the schedule. This is what's tough for me. I look at this schedule. In every single game on this schedule, Miami could win. That's the thing. Every single game, like there's no Georgia, there's no team like that, there's no Ohio State where you're like, that's a definite loss. Like every single game on this schedule, Miami can win. But you have Florida. I actually have them as a very, very slight underdog at Florida. Very, very slight. It's basically a toss-up. And then I have them as a toss-up Virginia Tech, toss-up against Louisville, toss-up against Florida State. But the thing is, man, here's the problem with doing this win total is you're like, okay, if they win those 8 games they're favored in, and then you got those 4 toss-ups, let's say they go 2-2 in those toss-ups, and they win those 8 games they're favored in, they go 10-2. Hooray, that's an over. Well, wait a second. This is Mario Cristobal. This guy literally cost himself a full win by just not taking a knee. And he's known for this in the past. He's known for it at Oregon. Like he's a very bad in-game coach. Like he's a very bad in-game manager. And he's probably going to lose you one game that he shouldn't lose every year. That's the thing. So like you can't just sit here and look at all those games that they're favored in and be like, yeah, they're just going to wipe the floor and win every single one of those games. That's not going to happen. They're going to lose to somebody they shouldn't lose to. We know that it's going to happen. So that's what is really tough. And you know what? If you were to put a gun to my head right now, I think I'd say 9-3. I hate it. I think I'd say 9-3. I think the sports books are pretty right. Like I like this team. And I think they should be 10-2, but they're probably going to go 9-3 because of a dumb coaching error in the game. and they'll lose a game they shouldn't. I hate this, man. I hate this. Originally, the line was 9.5. I was going to go under. Now that it's at 9, I'm going to defy my model. I'm going over. Long story short, I'm going over. One confidence point, though. I mean, I'll just say this. If they go 8-4, they go 8-4, it means that they lost at least a couple. Maybe it means they lost a bunch of games that they either were toss-ups against or they lost to somebody they shouldn't have. And
Or
and
Cam Ward got hurt.
or Cam Ward got hurt. That's very true. That's a very good thing to point out. Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of going out on a whim here with this over, but uh, I did not think I'd go here, but I originally had under, but we'll go over. It's tough, man. This was a tough team to peg
Hey,
here with this
that's why I
one.
texted before we did this. I texted you and I said, "Man, I hate myself for some of these picks because I'm going over Miami again like I did last year." And hey, I should have been right last year, but Mario Cristobal couldn't take a freaking kneel, man.
That can't happen again, right? Right? Right?
Right? Let's insert a
No,
little
but
Anakin meme.
yeah. No, but I see a path to 11-1. Like I can envision the world where this offense takes off. Cam Ward is like a Heisman candidate and they're going like 11-1 and Miami is like finishing in the top 5 at the end of the year, maybe hosting a playoff game or winning the ACC. Like I can see that. Like I can envision that with this team, but Cristobal doesn't have a good track record, man. Every single year, without fail, he underachieves relative to the roster that he has, and that's why I have a very tough time with this. But we're going over, but we're both say with low confidence, and I think we've laid it all out on the table here. But it is a very interesting team to watch, and yeah, we'll see very early on when they go to the Swamp first game. They go in there and they beat Florida in the Swamp. I'd say that's a pretty good start. If they go in and lose to Florida in the Swamp, I don't know. It's going to be a very telling game right there. All right. Next up, the North Carolina Tar Heels, UNC. They come in with a line of 7.5. Big juice to the over at -160. Mac Brown in his sixth season, in his second stint at UNC. If you count all the years he's coached at UNC, this is actually his 16th season at UNC, going back to the 90s. But sixth season in his second stint. And, Mac Brown, I think the big question here now, especially now, every year is he finally going to retire? Is he going to hang it up? I mean, you don't have Sam Howell anymore. You don't have Drake May. You got
Talk
Max
about
Johnson.
wasting NFL quarterbacks, man.
I, listen, I, you had Sam Howell, you had Drake May. You couldn't win a whole lot with them. Now you got Max Johnson. You're going to just keep it going. I mean, I don't know. But I'm not Mac Brown. He wants to keep coaching, and by all means, he can keep coaching. So, what do you got, man? What's your analysis on the Tar Heels?
Well, I will say this. Yes, Drake May's gone, and Drake May was a great, great player. But I think Max Johnson, although not as good as Drake May, I do think he can be a very, very solid quarterback. We look back at some of his prior numbers. Yeah, he was a little bit down last year, but in his time before that, he actually played very, very efficient football. And I think there is the probability, not the probability, I think there's the potential for him to play at a high level at North Carolina. Now, I do think it's still overall a step down from Drake May, but I don't think he's a bad quarterback at all. I think they have a very solid option at that spot. Now, I do like this offense. I mean, Omarion Hampton returns. That's 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns of production right there. He's coming back. You may have lost Tez Walker, but you still return J.J. Jones with 700 yards receiving. And then you've got some other guys coming in, but it's a bunch of young guys who haven't really put up a lot of yards, like Kobe Paysor, things like that. I mean, they've played a little bit, but they have to step up. And they didn't bring in any significant transfers to kind of alleviate that. So you are taking a little bit of a step back in the wide receiver room, a little bit of a step back at the quarterback position, and then you only return one starter on the offensive line. So it's a little bit to be desired here on the offensive side of the ball. It spells regression in its entirety. But at least you have Hampton, and at least you got a decent OC because they were 14th in offensive efficiency last year under Chip Lindsey in his first season as the OC. So I will say this. I do expect regression, but I don't expect them to drop out of the top 30 in offensive efficiency, okay? Which still makes them quite formidable in the ACC. The big bugaboo for them, was their defense, Shoe. We harped on it every single year. We've talked about UNC. Man, they always have these quarterbacks. They always have these quarterbacks. They always have these five-star D linemen, and they still can't get their defense right. What is going on? Well, they finally bucked up. They ripped off the Band-Aid. Now Jeff Collins is the new defensive coordinator, the former Georgia Tech head coach a few years back. And so the question is, can Jeff Collins make this 77th ranked defense and efficiency and get them into like the top 50? If he can get them into the top 50, then we're looking at a pretty decent team here because UNC, I mean, like their offense has been so good that they just need a few more stops to get some of these other wins that aren't going their way to tip in their favor. So let's take a look at the defensive side of the ball while I'm discussing that. You return Kamon Rucker. That's a really good pass rusher on the defensive line. And then you've got a bunch of upperclassmen kind of on that line, but overall, it's not a unit of major strength, unfortunately. So a little bit to be desired in lines of scrimmage here, Shoob, with North Carolina. They lose Cedric Gray to the NFL, one of their linebackers. They return Power Echols, one of their highly graded linebackers, but ultimately, I mean, you still lose an NFL linebacker, so that's going to be hard to supplement immediately. You return in the secondary and Tavius Lane, who's a pretty solid run support safety. I'll give him that. He grades out very well versus the run, so there's good support there. And then both corners return, and so we at least have what I would expect to be an improved secondary in Jeff Collins' first year as DC. So lines of scrimmage, they might be a little bit weak against the run, but I think they're going to be a decent team versus the pass, provided Jeff Collins can get together. And truly, I don't know how their defense could be any worse, man, than it has been under the last regime. So I do expect them to take a step forward, at least to get into that top 60 in like efficiency, which isn't saying much, but it's better than 77th, man. That's still quite an improvement. So we'll see. Let's look at the schedule, Shoob. They go at Minnesota week 1, which, by the way, Minnesota's got a new quarterback who's been pretty efficient his whole career, and Minnesota always boasts a pretty good defense. So that one makes me nervous. I have that as a probable to a loss, leaning to a loss because it's at Minnesota, and I just don't think it's a good matchup. W's against Charlotte, W against NC Central. Then you play James Madison, which is a little tricky because there's no Kirk Cignetti. They just lost their quarterback. They're under a new regime. Is James Madison going to be the James Madison of prior or the James Madison of, whatever their future is? It's hard to know what James Madison's going to be.
I don't think
So
they're
this one
going
I
to be
have,
that good.
yeah, this one I have as a probable leaning to a UNC win. And then you go at Duke. We talked about this one. I think they match up well against Duke. I think I have that as a probable. I lean to a potential win there. And notice that I got them 4-1 at this point, more than likely, but it's a product of their schedule, man, more than
Yeah.
anything. And we were talking about teams like Georgia Tech and all that who we have on the underside, but I think Georgia Tech is a team that could potentially beat them. I have them as a probable. They play after let's not skip a game. They play Pitt before that, but then they play Georgia Tech, who I have as a probable, and Georgia Tech, lucky for UNC, they get at home. So that's a big boost in their favor. And same for Pitt. And I see teams like Pitt and Georgia Tech as some of these potential toss-up games, given some of the discrepancies that they have, some of their weaknesses. But they have those teams at home, and that bodes very well for them. If they can't get one, if not both those games, that works amazing. Then you get a bye week to prepare for Virginia. You didn't need a bye week to prepare for Virginia. Beat Virginia, even though it's at Virginia. You're going to lose to Florida State more than likely in Tallahassee. Then you get a bye week to prepare for Wake Forest. You didn't even need the bye week to prepare for Wake Forest. Then you go at Boston College, who I think they actually match up pretty well with, given personnel. Um, and then you play NC State, which I think you're going to lose. So let's go back through here. Charlotte, NC Central, James Madison, Duke, and then maybe like split Pitt, Georgia Tech. Give me Virginia, Wake, Boston College. I guess that's an over. That's 8 wins. So I'm going over, but with a confidence point of 1.
All right. How about that? Xan going over on the Tar Heels at 7.5. So you got Mac Brown going 8-4, or
I
most
got him going
likely
8 and
eight and
4.
four in a season where we could be talking about retirement, et cetera, et cetera. Well, listen, North Carolina, listen, we all know I think I've made a good living the past 2 years on fading this team. And That's a lot of it's because of the
And
coaching
convince the
staff.
others to fade them.
Yes, and thankfully I've been right about that, and I've made significant money in my personal bank account from thankfully doing that. Significant Shoob money for Shoob standards. So, but anyways, I look at UNC and listen, it's schedule. So much of this is just schedule. We've hammered this point home a lot so far. I don't really have North Carolina power rated as that much better of a team than Georgia Tech. Like, what about you? I would say they're kind of in the same tier. Maybe North
That's
Carolina's a
what
little bit
I mean.
better.
Legitimately, that's why I said it's a toss-up, man. I think Georgia Tech could definitely beat them, but I mean they draw Georgia Tech at home. Um, uh, Pretty comparable, man.
Yeah, so bottom line, North Carolina, Georgia Tech are pretty comparable teams. One of them's their win total sitting at 7.5, and it's juiced up to almost to 8. And then the other team's sitting with a win total of only 5, and is probably not going to make a bowl game. We're talking about a team that might not make a bowl game and one that might go 8-4, but they're the same team. They're same power rated. It's schedule. It's literally all schedule. And UNC, I don't know what the hell they did, but if I'm like Georgia Tech, I'm saying like I'm looking at the ACC. I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? Look at North Carolina's schedule that you're giving them. They only got to play 2 teams that I think are significantly better than them in
Meanwhile, I got to
ACC
play
play.
Georgia every year.
Yeah, they already got to play Georgia. The ACC had to throw Notre Dame in the rotation this year in non-con. And then on top of that, they got like every single one of the top ACC teams. And you look at UNC, and I'm like, not only do they have a weak non-con, but they got Duke, Pitt, Georgia Tech, Virginia, Wake Forest, Boston College. I mean, are you kidding me? They won the freaking lottery here with these teams, and that's why the win total is so high. But anyways, I'll stop belittling the point here on the schedule. But as far as the team, it's going to be interesting, man. I think you're being a little bit too generous with the offense. I think this offense is going to take a pretty significant step back with Max Johnson. Like I think it's going to take a pretty significant step back. I mean, we've seen enough of Max Johnson at A&M. You know, I know you had Jimbo there, and he was at LSU before, but I just don't. I think he is what he is. It's a clear downgrade from Drake May. And then, the rest of the offense, I don't know, man. I don't really like what they got in skill positions besides Omarion Hampton. Omarion Hampton's the exception. Like he's one of the best running backs in the country. He's actually got a late round one grade on him, which I was a little surprised by, but I mean I see it. Like he's a good player. But anyways, outside of Hampton, like I don't really have much confidence in the skill position room. Clear downgrade at quarterback, and then the offensive line is not. It wasn't great last year, and what's there any reason to believe it's going to be good this year? Like that's a basically brand new offensive line. So I don't have a lot of confidence there. Like I think the defense is going to or the offense is going to take a really big step back, and then the defense. The defense has been really bad in the past few years. They got a little bit better last year. The year before that, it was really bad. But I think Mac finally did a good thing by getting rid of Gene Chizik. That was a terrible hire. And he got Jeff Collins. Jeff Collins, granted, former Georgia Tech head coach. I I don't know. Jeff Collins, I think he'll be a decent DC. Like I've heard good things about him as a coordinator, but I don't know. The rumor was when he left Georgia Tech, like the players didn't like him. Like the players, he was not a good players coach. That was like part of the rumors, at least when he left Georgia Tech. So I don't know. That's a question there. And he's not really inheriting a great defense, but they got 4 experienced returners on the D line. You already hit on Kamon Rucker. He's a projected second round pick. So they got some guys here that could realize their potential. Power Nichols, you already hit on him. I think there's reason to believe the defense could be okay. Not great, but just okay. Like the defense could take a little bit of a step forward, but I don't think that balances out the step back that the offense is going to take. And as far as the schedule, the model has 7.5 wins. I already belated the point here. Your favorite in 6 games, Charlotte, NC Central, James Madison, who just lost one of the best coaches, and then you got Pitt, Wake, and BC. I mean, you got the slumps of the ACC, thankfully on your draw, and then I got toss-ups at Minnesota, at Duke, at Virginia. I actually think I'm a little bit higher on Virginia, but it's like the opposite of Georgia Tech. Like I think this team will be worse than last year, but they might end up with a better record somehow. But even with that said, man, I got to stick to principle here. I'm sticking to principle. The model is 7.5 on the dot, so I got to make a decision here. And I'm going under. I'm sticking with principle. I've gone under in the last 2 years. I don't like the coaching staff. if Mac finally decides to hang it up and retire, I mean, the team probably will know that. Those guys will be trying to probably leave. I think there could be a quit alert factor here towards the end of the year. You know, I'm gonna lean under, but it's not very confident. It's a low confidence point, and I'm surprised that there's money that's coming in on the over here. Like I've seen the over is been juiced even further and further. This line might get to 8 actually. If it gets to 8, then I don't know what I'm missing, but I'm gonna bet personal money on the under if it gets up to 8 because I don't see them winning more than 8 games, but. I don't know. I think there's something I'm missing here, but I see just downside potential here. If anything, I don't see like a whole lot of upside potential. So next up, Virginia, the Cavaliers sitting with a win total of 4.5 wins. Virginia, pretty interesting team, man. I mean, we went into this last year and we made a video about them. We were saying this is going to be one of the worst teams in the whole Power Five, and I think they were a little bit better than we thought they were going to be. Like they were competitive in a handful of games against really good teams, and they were a team that they had Malik Washington who came out of nowhere. Like I don't know how that slipped past us. Like, and he ended up getting drafted by the Dolphins. And he was graded out as one of the best receivers in the whole ACC, let alone the country. So like I don't know what happened there. I think that kind of slipped under our noses, but now they got a win total of 4.5. A little bit of juice on the over at -120. Head coach Tony Ellett coming in, third season at Virginia. He is a hot seat candidate. So he's been 6-16 his first 2 years at UVA. Not very good. Third season now. If he throws up another 4-8 season or a 3-9 season, you got to be looking at yourself and being like, I don't think this is our guy. Might be time to move on. So what do you think, man? What do you think about the Cavaliers in year 3 under Tony Elliott?
I will say their quarterback position is at least improved from where it was at the beginning of last year when Tony Muskett was the starter. In the course of the season, they made the transition over to Anthony Calandria, and I do think he's a better player, and he's very young, is what I really like. He was a freshman last year. I mean, look, his numbers were not exceptional by any stretch of the imagination, but he showed some promise, and he showed that he might be able to develop into a pretty relatively good starter that, a team like Miami might try to come get later if he gets good enough. So I'm going to go with them getting better at the quarterback position. But, Shoob, running back position is something to be desired. Not a lot of production there. Their projected starter now right now is Kobe Pace, who's a senior, had about 400 yards, or no, sorry, 200 yards in production last year. Not much at all. So there's a lot to be desired at that position. They do have some transfers coming in. Chris Tyree from Notre Dame, about 400 yards. And then a Kent State transfer who brings in about 400 yards. And then they return Malachi Fields, which is nice because he's an 800-yard guy. But you lose Malik Washington. You lose the crown jewel of that offense. That's a pretty big loss, man. But they do have a decent little stable of receivers. But ultimately, I don't know that bringing in those two guys is going to supplement what Malik Washington did for you. I think it's going to be a slight step back on the offensive side of the ball, especially the running backs. I mean, I'm not very high on them at all, man. And then when I look at the offensive line, they do have one guy in Brian Stevens who grades out pretty well, but the rest of that offensive line is terrible, like absolutely terrible. So I mean, Calandria, man, he might actually be a good quarterback, but I mean, he's not getting any protection. So I mean, he's shown some flashes in the pan, so it'll be tough to see. He's the biggest bright spot of that offense, along with Malachi Fields. It'll be interesting to see if they can get anything going, but I don't have high expectations, man. They were 81st in offensive efficiency last year. And even if they get a little bit better, I don't think they're going to break the top 75, man. I think I'm talking like incrementally better here if they get better. You can't lose Malik Washington and expect to get much better. But anyway, then we transition to the defense. The defensive line is terrible too, man. I just look at what they have there, and there's just nothing that looks good to me. And I look at how some of those players that are returning graded last year, and it's just not good at all. And then I mean, we go to the next level. At least they have linebacker Cam Robinson who comes back, who was a pretty solid player. They do bring in a transfer from Akron and Corey Thomas, who grades out pretty well. He plays like a linebacker safety hybrid, so he could add a little bit to their defense there. And on the defensive, at least in the secondary, they have Jonas Sanker, who returns, pretty solid player. They have Kendron Smith, who's a great pickup. They got him from Penn, who graded out very, very well per PFF. But the only problem is he played against a bunch of Ivy League teams, so we'll see how he does against some Power Four competition. Um, and then let me say this: the secondary, I think, will be the strength of that defense. They'll improve a little bit on the secondary. The linebacking unit might actually be a little bit improved, but at lines of scrimmage, they're awful. And that's kind of a big deal, man, when you're trying to win football games. Let's look at the schedule. Richmond, that's going to be a win. You go at Wake Forest. I think that's probable. That's winnable though. Maryland has as a probable. I'm expecting Maryland to take a little bit of a step back. That's a winnable game. You got at Coastal. I think they beat Coastal. Then you go on a bye week. You know what's crazy, Shoob, is there is the possibility that Virginia could start 3-1 or 4-0 here, but still not be a very good team, just by nature of the schedule. Then we look at Boston College. I think is probable, and then Louisville loss, Clemson loss, UNC loss. Bye week go at Pitt, and because you have the bye week to go at Pitt, I think that's a probable. You might be able to steal that one. Then you got Notre Dame loss, SMU loss, Virginia Tech loss. The back end of the schedule is kind of tough for the Cavaliers. So they're going to have to steal these wins early. The only way they're hitting this over is if they start 4-0, Shub. They lose any of these games, they lose to Wake, they lose to Maryland, they're not hitting this over. That's their only hope to hit this over in my estimation. Because when you look back at the schedule, who else are they potentially going to beat past those first four games? Boston College, Pitt, that's really it. So I'm looking at the schedule. I'm seeing six winnable games. So I need them to go 5-1 to hit the over. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm going under Shub, under 4.5 for the Cavaliers.
Under 4.5 for Virginia and
Confidence
confidence.
point of I'll say one because I don't know what to expect from from them honestly. But based upon the litmus test, not the litmus test, based upon what I see at the lines of scrimmage, that's my biggest concern. And lines of scrimmage win and lose games. So
Very fair points all around. Yeah, I'm a little bit higher on this team. I think the QB battle is like super intriguing. Like I when we were going through these teams, I know Virginia, and I can have a lot of eyes on them because it's Virginia. But like this QB battle between Calandria and Musket, I think it's actually pretty fascinating because I went and looked in depth at these guys, and you look at their like regular stats, they both had nearly identical passing stats, but they're sort of contrasting styles of play, so to speak. Calandria, for instance, he had a huge gap, huge disparity between how well he performed when he was blitzed, which he did not do well against the blitz, and then when he was not blitzed, which he went off. He did really well against the blitz. And then you have a guy like Musket who was pretty steady, even splits across the board. Musket was more so of the steady veteran, and you have Calandria who is the fire hose, young gun that's very sporadic and has a high ceiling but a pretty low floor. I think it's a very fascinating QB battle, but at the end of the day, even despite that, like their stats came out pretty much even. So there was a little bit of give and take there on either side of that coin. Uh, I think Calandria, without a doubt, Calandria, I mean, he's a true sophomore. He's the future of the program, I think, at quarterback. Like he has to be. I mean, he's got the upside, but thankfully you got Musket. And, that's one thing I like, man. When I do win totals, I look at these teams that have depth at quarterback and at least two options to go to. I like that because if one of them gets hurt, at least the season isn't gonna just fall apart. So I think there is a floor with this team here. I think Calandria is really the ticket here for them to get this over to me. I think Calandria controls the ceiling of the offense. If Calandria like takes another step forward and he does a little bit better, improves on his game when he's being blitzed, like I think this team can get to 5 wins, man. I like the ceiling here. I think the transfers also. I know they lost Malik Washington, but all the transfers they got in, they're not great players, but they're very decent like veteran players at lower levels. They just can provide stability and depth on both sides of the ball. I think that there is a path here for this over. And I look at the model, 5.6 wins. I think the model is a little bit high in Virginia, but it's telling me this is an overplay here. And I look at 5.6 wins. I have them favored against Richmond, Coastal Carolina. That's a Coastal Carolina team that lost Grayson McCall. I mean, this is not going to be the Coastal Carolina that we've been used to the last few years. So I like them to win that game. And then, of course, I have them favored against Boston College as well. So I I see their toss-ups at Wake, Maryland, North Carolina, and at Pitt. I think there's a chance they can beat UNC. They got Pitt on the bye week, after the bye week, I should say. I don't know, man. I see a path here for 5 wins, and I'm gonna take the over. I think you can expect reasonable progression offensively. I don't think the defense is going to be very good. I mean, you highlighted the defense is not great, but the win total is at 4.5. I just see Calandri especially as like the key here to hit this over. And if he improves a lot going into his sophomore year, like I think there's upside here. And I think there's a reasonable floor for 3 or 4 wins. Like, I'm taking the over and I'm going to give it a medium confidence. So I'm actually a little higher on this team. I don't really know if Tony Elliott. So this is what I will say. This comes with drawbacks. Tony Elliott, of course, if he hits the over here and goes 5-7, like great, you hit the over for my betting purposes for my win total. But if you're the AD and you're like, well, you went 5-7 in your third year, like you're probably still gonna get fired. Like I don't know. I don't know what the AD's thinking there, but like you see, it's all relative. It's all relative here. From a betting perspective, I'm like, I actually like this team. But if you're looking at if you're a Virginia fan, you're like, well, I don't care. I don't want to go 5-7. Like this team sucks. So I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen there, but yeah, there's drawbacks, but I'm gonna go with medium confidence here on the over. All right. Virginia Tech, last but certainly not least. How about the Hokies, man? I'm looking forward to getting into them. Virginia Tech is everybody's dark horse this year going to 2024. I think the secret's out pretty much on the Hokies. Yeah, I can't wait to dive into this team, man. What do you got on them? And Brent Pry's third year. This is his third season now at Virginia Tech. Win total is at 8 wins, and there's a slight juice to the over at -130.
Well, I will say this, man. Virginia Tech, loved being the only guy to go over on them last year. Take my victory lap. And I gotta tell you, man, Enter Sandman, college football video game, everything, like that better be in the video game. Let's just say that.
Oh, it will be.
But
It
hey,
has to be.
it has to be. But anyway, man, Brent Pry's done a great job with this team. Look, Kyron Drones, the transfer from Baylor, came off and actually became a pretty quietly effective quarterback. You didn't really hear his name much, but his stats are pretty solid. 17 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 800 rushing yards. That's pretty dang good. And then they got transfer Colin Schlee from UCLA, who was a highly touted transfer before he went off to UCLA. So Colin Schlee is going to be the backup there. So they've got great depth at the quarterback position because Colin Schlee's no scrub either. So I love that. You return Bashul Tutin, who had 863 yards last year, very solid running back. And then you return Jalen Lane, 500 yards, DeQuan Felton, 650 yards. So you've got some returning production at the wide receiver position. You return 4 out of 5 starters on the offensive line. Although, I will admit, none of them grade very well.
No, it was
So
not a
we
very
can
good
only
offensive
hope
line.
we can only hope that they at least slightly improve this year. They did get one transfer from Georgia State and Montavious Cunningham, and he's probably going to be their best player based on it if we're talking about grades. But we can at least expect some improvement in this offensive line just from a continuity standpoint. But is it still going to be even an average offensive line? That remains to be seen. We'll see. But if this offensive line can take even just an average step forward, this offense could be very, very good. Now, defense, man, this is actually where I think they shine. I love Virginia Tech's defense this year. Look, they were only 63rd in efficiency last year, which that's not really normal. You know, Virginia Tech is known for their defense, like for years and years and years, except for here recently when they've been kind of this downturn of their history. But look, man, defensive line, defensive end, Antoine Royale Ryland, an elite pass rusher coming back. That's huge. They bring Ananias Peebles from UNC, who grades incredibly well on the defensive line. That's huge. They add Kevin Gilliam in the portal from OU, who is a former 94 grade 4-star recruit. They've got talent on that line, man. They do lose Phildarius Payne, who graded really well on PFF, but ultimately they're bringing in much more than they're losing. I really like their D line. I think their D line is going to be really, really solid and one of the best in the ACC. Definitely, probably a top 4, top 5 defensive line in the ACC. I like it a lot. And then they also brought in Sam Brumfield from Middle Tennessee State, who grades out very well and is a solid middle linebacker option for them. And then they returned their other 2 starting middle linebackers, or sorry, linebackers, I should say. So I love that from a continuity standpoint. Looking back at the secondary, Jalen Stroman, their safety returns, very solid player, and they returned both of their corners, who are both pretty solid players, especially Dorian Strong, who could be playing on Sundays. So we've legitimately got a very solid defense here from the Virginia Tech Hokies. So much so that they're probably going to be a top 3 or 4 defense in the ACC. They're looking very good. I like them a lot for that reason. I think that's where their strength lies, and in Kyron Drone's ability to not create opportunities for the other team while your defense is getting stops, because Kyron Drones only threw 3 interceptions last year. If you're not turning the ball over and your defense is getting stops, chances are you're winning games. And if Kyron Drones can build on that, hey man, I like where this team's heading. Week 1 at Vandy, W. Marshall, W. At Old Dominion, W. Rutgers, probable, most likely a W. At Miami, I have that as a probable. Miami doesn't really have the home field that they should have just because they play in the Hard Rock. But I'm going to go with a probable there. But it is one that they can win. At Stanford, I'm going to go with a probable because I think Stanford's a little bit tricky. I do think they're better than they get credit for. And I do think that Stanford's going to buy 1 or 2 teams this year that really are expecting that win on their resume. But just for some reason, they just can't get it from good old Stanford there. And then they go on a bye week to play Boston College. You got a bye week to prepare for Boston College. You're going to win that game. Then you got Georgia Tech, the mighty Stingers, the thorn on the sides for everybody. I have as a probable, but I lean to a win. At Syracuse, I think they win that game. Then you go to Clemson, which I have as a probable. Giving them respect here, man. I have that as a probable for Clemson. But and they're at home too, man. This could be a night game for all we know. This could be an Enter Sandman kind of game. Like this legitimately could be
That's going to be a
pretty
good one.
nice.
That's going to be a good one.
Yep. And then you got the bye week. Go at Duke. I think off the bye week, you're going to win that game. And then you got Virginia to close the year. You know how I feel about Virginia. I think you win that game. So we're looking at my wins, man. I've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that's just without me going through the probables. So I'm over, man. I'm over on Virginia Tech. Um, our line, uh, our line is sitting there at 8. Is it still at 8, Shoob?
It is still at 8. Yep, I know. I got to
It's still at
preface
8.
that with all this movement
Yeah,
this past week.
yeah. I'm gonna go over because even if something goes awry, I can't see them going below 8 wins. I just can't see it. Because even if Kyron Drones gets hurt, man, they've got Colin Schlee. So
Yep.
I'm going over. Confidence point, 3 points.
3 confidence points to the over. All right. Love it. So I share the enthusiasm with this Hokies team, man. So I kind of want to talk about Kyron Drones a little bit more in depth. I think one thing that I was looking at Drones. He was terrific against the blitz, which is not something and again, looking at these PFF grades and everything and doing some deep dive and analysis, all these numbers, reading between the lines. I'm like, this guy is phenomenal against the blitz, which is not a trait that you see in many quarterbacks, even dual threat quarterbacks. And being able to run and being just as good as a passer versus when blitz versus when you're not blitz, like that's a good trait there to have. And in addition, one other significant split that I noticed, there's a huge disparity between when Drones used play action and when he was not using play action. Drones was a way significantly better passer on play action versus when they did not run play action. And I think that's
It's
something
because
that
he's
their
so deadly
offensive
with his
coordinator
legs, man.
exactly, but I think that's something they need to run more because I looked at those splits and they're only using play action 35% of the time. And I'm like, especially when you have that big of a disparity, when your quarterback is that much more effective on play action, I think you need to run that more. And I'm looking at OC Tyler Barron and or Bowen, and I'm like, man, you guys start running play action more, a little bit higher clip. Like I think drones can, like your offense is going to take off. I play to the strengths of your quarterbacks. I mean, I know I'm making it simple. I mean, I'm not a football coach, but I'm like I think if you change the play calling a little bit in the scheme and use more play action, like this offense is upside, man. Play to your players' strengths. And you mentioned Colin Schlee. I was just about to mention that. That's a phenomenal backup option to have. Before that, they did not have that option. They had Emery Williams the third, I think, who's just a freshman last year,
Oh,
didn't even play that well.
I don't even remember, man.
I was until they got Schlee, I was like, well, if Drones gets hurt, you could see the bottom fall out here. But now that they have Schlee as the backup, I just more reason to like this offense. And I think that they are in store for a big jump, man. I think that they could be top 15, top 20 offense now with drones. And I think, yeah, I think the upside is there offensively for sure. And then on the defense, I mean, my main notes, you already hit it, man, with those players and those transfers. I really like the transfers of Peebles and Brumfield. Like, good job there. But I think, will it be enough? I think if you look at the rest of the defense, I know you're pretty high on it. Some of the other defense, I think there is a little bit of holes there, but you got to trust the defensive acumen of Brent Pry. I mean, Brent Pry is a defensive coordinator at heart before he became the head coach. So you got to kind of trust now it's year three. Maybe there is a little bit of a leap forward to take here now that he's third season. He's got his guys in the program. They've been in the system. They know what to do. I think you could expect to leap forward, but not as much as I expect to leap forward on the offense, especially if they start running more play action with drones. But anyways, schedule. So win totals at 8. You're pretty high on the over. 3 confidence points to the over for you. What do you think my model has? I want you to try to guess what number you think my model has for Virginia Tech.
7.8.
No, you got to go a little bit higher.
9?
My my model is drunk on Virginia Tech. It is drunk on some hokey juice. The model listens to Enter Sandman in his free time, I think, because the model has 10 wins even for Virginia Tech. It
Oh,
is
wow.
10 wins. That's absurd. Now, do I agree with that?
What a
No,
jump.
I think the model is I think the model's overvaluing just sheer returning production, which definitely is a big that's a big thing that you got to look at. That's something that's big that you factor in, but it's not like all the returning production is great. There are some holes on, especially on the defensive side of the ball, I'd say. And the offensive line too. I mean, the offensive line was not great last year. Are you just expecting it to take a step forward? If the offensive line does take a step forward, then whoa boy. I mean, I already like it. If the offensive line improves, then like I really do think they can win 10 games. But anyways, the model's telling me something here. The model has Virginia Tech power rated as the best team in the ACC. I've been holding that back here this whole time. I've been holding that back. It is Tech power rated as the number one team in the ACC. I have them better than Miami, better than Florida State, better than NC State, better than Louisville, better than Clemson. Like I don't know. It is high on the Hokies. I don't have them as an underdog to a single team on the schedule. I don't have them as an underdog. I have them favored in every game, and then I have 2 toss-ups. The 2 toss-ups are at Miami and home against Clemson. So I will say one drawback here. You look at the scheduling dynamics. I actually think the scheduling dynamics don't work well in their favor because, like you said, you got to go at Stanford, and I know Stanford's not a great team, but that's something you come off the road game at Miami, and then you got to go travel all the way at Stanford across the country to play a conference game. Now, I actually think that could be a tricky spot. That could be a huge letdown performance where Stanford could pull off a huge win if you don't play your A game. So I see that as sort of trappy. And then right before that Clemson game that you were mentioning, that's probably gonna be a night game. Enter Sandman, like that Clemson game, that's gonna be a big one in the ACC this year. Right before that, they got to go travel to Syracuse, play at Syracuse in the Dome. That's trappy AF. That just screams trap right there. So, needless to say, like, yes, I like the team a lot, and I'm going over for sure, and I'm going 3 confidence points to the over, but I don't know if I would just be like, oh yeah, they're going to win 10 games. They're going to go 10-2 for sure because there are some trappy games on the schedule. So I think the most likely outcome is probably 9-3. I think that's reasonable. I think they go 9-3. I think that they are a legitimate contender to win the ACC. I actually took them at 40-1 to win the ACC a couple months ago, actually. Um, I knew my model before when it was in its preliminary stages of development. I knew the model was high on Virginia Tech. And I was like, okay, if this model has Tech power rated as like the number one team, then I should probably take them 40-1 to win the conference. So that's what I did. It has now come down. You can't get it at that price, but so I will definitely be rooting for Virginia Tech to win the ACC for my bank account. I'll just say that. I'll just say that. But yeah, man, I think that this is a legitimate ACC contender. I think 10-2 is definitely on the table. I'm going over with 3 confidence points, and now that we've done a few of these teams, I just want to ask you, like, what are the odds that we see an ACC championship game between Virginia Tech and NC State? Like, I think that's on the table.
I would actually love that because it would be some just unexpected matchup. Like it's not something that, yeah, and I would love that, man. You're getting rid of the Clemsons, the Florida States, someone else, like one of your, yeah, no, I would absolutely love that, man. I would
Like,
tune in, I would watch that for
I
sure.
wouldn't rule that out. Yeah, I agree. That would be cool for parity sake. But yeah, I think that if not both of those teams, I think it's unlikely both of them make it. That's the exact matchup. But like I think there's a pretty legitimate shot here that either Vautech or NC State can make the ACC title game this year. Like those are two teams that I think are going to be pretty good teams.
Well, Shub, yeah, I think it's going to be one of those two teams, Miami, Clemson, or FSU. It's like those five,
Yeah. And then
and
Louisville, well,
maybe Louisville.
maybe Louisville. I'm not expecting it, but if, Braum, I don't know. They're definitely in the mix, but I
I
would
think
agree with
those are the
you.
six teams that definitely are gonna you got to put your money on.
Yeah, I would agree. And now that we've covered the bulk of this conference, we're going to cover the newbies tomorrow or in the next video. But, those teams, we're not talking about the cream of the crop in that next video. So I really think that we've covered the ACC champion in his last two videos. And I think that the ACC championship game will most likely be two of those five teams that we just talked about. And I think it's going to be fun, man. Like, I got to be honest, I'm not normally intrigued by the ACC every year. It's usually honestly kind of a boring assessment. Like, it's probably Clemson. It was Clemson and nobody else for like 8 years straight. And then Florida State came up. Okay, Florida State's in the mix now. That's
You
interesting.
know, there's other teams that can contend too. The ACC actually looks like a fun conference this year.
I
And I will
think
say
so
this:
too.
what about SMU, man? They're kind of a dark horse. Like I don't think they'll win it, but they're definitely going to be like probably in the upper tier.
That's fair. Yeah, I did just brush over SMU pretty hard. I know SMU has a high win total, but I don't know. I know the model actually likes the ponies too. They like the Mustangs, but I don't know. I think just off a general principle, new teams into a league, teams that go into a new league usually generally struggle, I feel like more often than not. But we'll save that for the next video. But I don't know. But I would agree with you. I think Louisville, SMU are kind of that like next rung down of teams that maybe could surprise if things went well. But I would agree with you, man. Like the point is like this is the first time, this is the first year in a while where I'm actually like, okay, like I'm interested to see like, what happens this year and how this plays out. Because there's like multiple games that I'm be looking forward to that. Like I circle those games. That Virginia Tech Clemson game, I think that's a
Yeah,
big one. And I think at the end of the year, that's probably going to be a pretty good one. Like there's a decent chance that Virginia Tech is like 7-1 or maybe even 8-0 if it goes really well, like going into that Clemson game. And that would be hype. Like that would be hype, man. To have Vaught Tech and Lane Stadium, man, to have that stadium back and popping like it used to in the 2000s when they had Mike Vick and those years, man, like that'd be great for college football. So
it would be.
all right, man. I think we've gone long enough. It's been fun so far, but we still got a little bit more ACC to go. And without further
And
ado,
three more power conferences.
and three more power conferences. Yeah, man. It's the dog days of summer are upon us. But without further ado, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Leave a like, leave a comment if you enjoyed the content. Let us know how you think your favorite teams will do. And just give us your thoughts and opinions. What teams are you betting on? Which picks do you like? Which picks do you not like? This is Xan Shoob, the Saturday Scholars, signing out. See y'all later. Have a great day.
Saturday Scholars on the mic, breaking it down so right. Their analysis hits the target, prediction accuracy so razor tight. Bank account on the rise with each winning call. Not here for hot takes, just the facts, that's all. Get it out, shooting snacks and zany bars, a treat for each week. College football fans rejoice, find what you seek. Hidden gem in the podcast world, they know all. Saturday Scholars, anthem standing tall and tall. Saturday Scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. standing tall and tall.